it is 2025. Now, if your New Year's resolution was to learn guitar, it can be super easy to go on YouTube and get completely overwhelmed. So for the new guitarists out there, let's cover the essentials of what you need to know and next steps after this video. So we're going to talk about how the guitar works, basic chords, basic tabs, and then next steps. So we start with how the guitar actually works. Now, you probably already know that you've got these 6 metal strings going down the length of the guitar, but you've also got these horizontal bars called frets. Frets are where we press our fingers down to make each string make a different tone. So there's a huge difference between me hitting this first thinnest string without any frets pressed down, or the same string with one of the frets pressed down. The higher we go up the string, the higher the pitch gets. So that's how we play single notes, but there are also things called chords, which is any 3 or more unique notes played at the same exact time. So now I'm combining strings at the same time. Each string might get a different fret, or maybe the same fret on multiple strings. Now, the really cool thing is that songs, pretty much any song, can be broken down into a set of chords. When we put chords in a row, this is called a chord progression. So, if you're interested in playing songs, the best thing to know right off the bat is a few unique chord shapes. We're going to learn the most basic chords here. We're going to learn a C chord, a G chord, a D chord, an E minor chord, and an A minor chord. Now, you'll notice that these are letters, and for some of them we're saying the word minor. So, really quick, before we learn these chord shapes, we should know that chords are named after letters of the alphabet A through G. And for each of these, we could have major or minor. Now, major chords just sound happy, like this. Minor chords sound more sad, like this. When we say just a chord name, like E or C or D, we're assuming that it's major, happy. If we want to make it sad or minor, then we specify E minor, C minor. So let's start learning our chord shapes here. We're going to talk about these frets by giving them a number. So maybe I'll say we want to put our second finger on the 3rd fret. Well, we'd take our second finger and we'd count 1, 2, 3 metal bars and place it just before that on whatever string we're looking to use. So let's start with maybe the easiest chord, which is the E minor. Really simple. There's only 2 things we need to do. We need to put our first finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. So I'm going to count backwards on my strings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and find the 2nd fret, 1, 2. And this is where I'll put my first finger. The only other step here is to put my 2nd finger also on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, which means it can tuck right behind that first finger. Now, if I strum through all 6 of these strings, I should have an E minor chord. That's awesome. This means that anytime we see EM in any song we're learning, we know the shape we need for that chord. Next, let's take a look at the C chord. C chord is a little bit more of a stretch, but it's not too difficult. We're actually going to start picking this one, playing this one, from the 5th string, which means we're going to skip the 6th string altogether. I'm going to take my 3rd finger and put it on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. I'm going to take my middle finger and put it on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Now, my 3rd string is actually going to be open, which means I'm going to play it, but I'm not going to press anything down. My first finger will go on the first fret of the second string, and then my first string will also be open. A really easy way to remember this shape is that the third finger goes on the third fret, second finger on the second fret, first finger on the first fret. Now, if I pick this from the fifth string, I've got a nice C chord. Already with the two chord shapes we know, we can start playing some basic songs by practicing moving back and forth between them. E minor, C, E minor, C. It takes a little bit of time and practice to get transitioning between chords down, so go nice and slow, go easy on yourself. Remember that these are brand new to you. One other thing I want to mention is that you might be encountering a little bit of buzz, or maybe some notes aren't quite ringing out, and that's an easy fix. We want to make sure we're playing with the tips of our fingers so that they're not getting in the way of any other strings, and we're pressing down nice and hard, which might hurt at first, but your fingers will strengthen the more that you play guitar. But as long as we're squeezing into our palm, playing with the tips of our fingers, we're going to get a nice clear note out of there. It can also help to play one note, one string of a chord at a time. And if you find one that maybe isn't quite sounding right, you can adjust your fingers until it is, and then move on. But let's learn a G chord. Now, this one is probably the biggest stretch of any chord we've done yet. But it's not all too difficult. Our middle finger is going to grab the third fret of the sixth string. So all the way down. Our first finger is going to get the second fret of the fifth string. Now here's the easy part. The next three strings are all open. We don't need to press anything down until our pinky grabs the third fret of the first string. Then we can play all six strings and get a nice G chord. Some people find that the middle finger is easier to use than the pinky, but I've always liked using the pinky. This also lets me use my third finger to play some other chord shapes or tones in the future if I need to. If I use my third finger, my pinky's kind of fallen off the edge and a little useless down the road. We've only got two more chords to learn here. Let's take a look at a D. Now, D, we're going to start on the fourth string, so we don't need to pick the first two strings at all. And our fourth string will actually be open. We won't press anything down. I'm going to take my first finger and put it on the second fret of the third string. My ring finger will grab the third fret of the second string. Then I like to think of these two fingers here as a little doorway for my middle finger to go through and grab the second fret of the first string. If I play that from the fourth string, I've got a D chord. Now let's look at an A minor. For A minor, I'm going to play the open fifth string, my middle second finger here on the second fret of the fourth string, my ring finger on the second fret of the third string, so we've kind of got this E minor shape, and then my first finger is going to go on the first fret of the second string, and I'll play that from the fifth string. Now, to turn chord shapes like this into a song, we mentioned we put them in a row called a chord progression. So let's practice four shapes real quick. Let's do C to G to D to E minor. We'll strum each one time. 1, 2, 3, 4. C, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. D, 2, 3, 4. E minor. One more time. C, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. D, 2, 3, 4, E minor, 2, 3, 4. Now, you should be able to look up the chords to a bunch of songs and be comfortable playing them. Next, we need to understand what tabs are and how they work. Now, tabs are kind of like the cheat sheet of learning guitar. They're like sheet music for guitarists, but a lot easier and a lot less intimidating. Tabs have 6 lines on them, and these are the 6 strings of your guitar. The first thinnest string is all the way at the top, and the 6th thickest string is all the way at the bottom. Now, our other strings here are 5, 4, 3, and 2, and we're going to put numbers on here. Where sheet music you might be used to dots, these are numbers, and the numbers are what fret we're going to play. So, for example, if I put the number 3 right here, we can see that this is the 5th string of our guitar. All that this means is we're going to play the 3rd fret of the 5th string. If I move that number 3 up to here, well, that's the 2nd string. So now we'll be playing the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. This is a really great way to write out solos or riffs or just fun little single note lines that we want to learn. We can also look up tabs to songs we love online and immediately be able to read like a book left to right, top to bottom, and understand how that song is played on the guitar. But we're not restricted to just single note riffs. We could also put 2, 3, or even chords on here, which we do by layering numbers on top of each other. So if I put something like this on here, we would play the 0 on the 4th string, which is an open string, the 2nd fret on the 3rd string, 3rd fret on the 2nd string, and 2nd fret on the 1st string. And we realize, oh my goodness, we've just written out a D chord in the tabs. So sometimes tabs can even be useful for learning difficult chords. If we see a really complicated chord name and we're like, oh man, I have no idea how to play that, if we can see tabs underneath that complicated name, it'll show us exactly where to put our fingers to play that. So now we have a really basic understanding of how the guitar actually works, some basic chords, and a basic knowledge of tabs, which is amazing. That gets us set up to play single note riffs and chords to songs, and we're already well on our way. But if we want to go a step further, what should we learn from here? Well, there are a couple important pieces of knowledge. Like we talked about that letters of the musical alphabet go from A to G. There are also these things called sharps in between some of the notes that bring the amount of unique notes up to 12. Each of those have a major chord and a minor chord, which means there are 24 unique chord shapes that are really useful to know. They may not be as common as the first chords we just learned, but the more chords we know, the more songs we can play. So you want to learn those 24 unique chords. Now, thankfully, they don't all need to have a unique shape like we just learned. There are these kinds of chords that are one shape and slidable up and down the neck. These are called power chords, or another type of slidable chord is a bar chord. Those would be another really useful thing to learn. Finally, you might want to learn some rhythm with the right hand when we're picking. So we could learn different strumming patterns to make songs more unique and lively. We can also learn some finger picking techniques to make songs sound really beautiful. Now, of course, as a shameless plug, I do have courses for all of these things in the description below. They're put together in a really ordered way to make sense. They're longer than this video, but a lot of them have quizzes and PDFs, and there's also a completely free PDF for this video so that you can remember and practice just the things that we covered here down in the description. You can always leave a comment and a follow. We're going to cover all sorts of guitar techniques in 2025. I'm really looking forward to going through it with you, and I'll see you in the next video.